Hello everyone and welcome to our next CEM homework review video. I'm going to be focusing on the tasks within week 6 and hopefully you're in year 5, block 5 if you're watching this. We're going to be focusing on tasks within the 11 plus verbal reasoning book. So let's bring up the slide so you can see the book that we're going to be using. We will put Billy in the bottom corner as well. So these tasks will, as I say, focus on week 6 and we're going to be looking at 2 particular tests. Let's have a look at the actual homework schedule just so we can see. So yes, we're looking at week 6 and we're going to be concentrating on the You Must task, and there's actually 2 tests that we're going to be concentrating on. There's test 26 on pages 94 to 97 and we're also going to look at test 27 on pages 98 to 100. So let's begin. So the first test we're going to be referring to is test 26, and this is on pages 94 to 97. Hopefully you've been able to do it and complete it already. Obviously if you haven't, then this probably is an opportunity to pause the video and then have a go at the test, and then you'll be able to mark it afterwards, because I'm now going to go through and obviously explain what those answers were. So the first test is actually on Buckingham Palace. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read down through this passage and then we're going to answer a series of questions about it. Buckingham Palace. Since 1837, Britain's sovereigns have officially resided in Buckingham Palace, the London-based administrative headquarters of the monarch, which adjoins St James's Park and Westminster. The building was built in 1703 for John Sheffield, a politician who became the Duke of Buckingham. 58 years later, King George III bought Buckingham House for Queen Charlotte, his spouse. In the 1820s, an architect called John Nash carried out a series of extensions for King George IV. But Queen Victoria was in fact the first monarch to make Buckingham Palace her official residence. Today, the palace boasts 775 rooms across 4 wings, which encompass a quadrangle. Not surprisingly, each wing's name includes a compass point in its title. Facing the gardens and to the west of the grand entrance are the chambers most often frequented by the Queen and members of the royal family. Collectively, these rooms are known as the state rooms. The most southerly stateroom is the ballroom, which the west gallery connects to the first of 4 rooms, which afford the view of the gardens. The state dining room often hosts large lunch parties, and many prominent figures have dined in this grandiose setting. Each year, the Queen invites more than 50,000 guests to the palace, and in August and September, hundreds of thousands of visitors are willing to pay to pass through the palace's doors. The more frugal tourist, however, might be content with simply admiring the facade and witnessing changing the guard, which takes place on the palace's forecourt. During this ceremony, the privilege of guarding the sovereign is passed from one regiment to another. From the 1st of April to the 31st of July, this happens daily at 11:30 a.m. For all other months, changing the guard occurs at the same time, but on alternate days. One royal tradition that occurs on a more ad hoc basis is the rising and lowering of the royal standard. A flag always flies above Buckingham Palace, but if the Queen is in residence, a Union Jack is replaced by the royal standard. It falls to the responsibility of the flag sergeant to ensure the correct flag is flying. So hopefully when you were reading that down through, there's quite a few facts and dates and key bits of information. You were underlining things that you felt were important that they could possibly ask you about. Let's have a look at some of those questions. Question 1. Why did Queen Victoria take up residence in Buckingham Palace? When did Queen Victoria take up residence in Buckingham Palace? So we need to go back to the text. We can see obviously the answer here is 1837. But it does mention within the first line, since 1837, Britain's sovereigns have officially resided in Buckingham Palace. And then if we look at lines 7 to 8, it states Queen Victoria was in fact the first monarch to make Buckingham Palace her official residence. Therefore, Queen Victoria took up residence in Buckingham Palace in 1837. So hopefully you've got that one correct. Question 2, according to the text, and that's always a really important line, we've got to rely on what it says on the text, which statement below applies to Buckingham Palace? It was made larger by King George III in the 1820s, so if we come back, it talks here about in the 1820s, an architect called John Nash carried out a series of extensions for King George IV. So we actually need to rule that one out because that mentions King George III. So we're just trying to catch you out a little bit there. It has wings on 4 sides which enclose a courtyard. So let's just go and have a little look. And I've actually got an aerial view here of Buckingham Palace. And if I was to actually just draw a bit like a square, I suppose. I just draw the 4 sides. And you can see there's the quadrangle, the 4 sides. And then it's obviously got a forecourt in the middle there. Or, sorry, not a forecourt. This is the forecourt here. This is the forecourt, the bit in the front, and then you've got the quadrangle, which is that part there, the courtyard, if you like. You can see actually throngs of people here. These are all people down the front, and that's where the changing of the guard would take place in front of Buckingham Palace there. And when they talk about facade, of course, they talk about how wonderful it looks from the front. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Where is the state dining room located? Now, if we were to go back to the passage, it would tell us, but it's north of the ballroom. And I thought what might be quite a good idea here is just to show you a little map of that quadrangle we've just looked at. And if we refer to, so we've got a key down here, state dining room, which is there. And we've got the ballroom, which is J, which is there. And then there's a series of compass points over here, which are quite useful to obviously have a look at. So within lines 13 to 14, so it talks here and it says, the most southerly stateroom is the ballroom. Therefore, the state dining room must be north of the ballroom. And that's obviously just clarified by this particular map as well. So let's go and have a look at question 4. What do the palace's facade and changing the guard have in common? Well, you may remember it talks about the more frugal tourist, in other words, a tourist that doesn't want to necessarily pay, however, might be content, happy with simply admiring the facade and witnessing changing the guard, which takes place on the palace's forecourt. So there's no charge to view it. Let's go and have a look at question 5. According to the text, which of the following is not true? Better underline the word not. The state dining room can accommodate 50,000 people. Well, you might remember in the text, it talked about 50,000 guests coming to the palace each year, but I don't think we're necessarily going to be able to fit 50,000 people within the state dining room. 50,000 people is a lot. You might consider a football stadium holding that amount of people, but not necessarily the state dining room. So hopefully you got that one. Which of the following is not mentioned in the text? And the answer to this one is the name of King George IV's wife, which is D. So it was 6D. And just to show you, it did mention about King George III's spouse. That was Queen Charlotte. But there's no mention of King George IV's at all. Let's go back to the next question. So that was question 6, and we've got the last one. According to the text, which of the following must be true? And the answer is the Queen is not always in residence at Buckingham Palace. And if we go back to the text, you might remember it says here, a flag always flies above Buckingham Palace. But if the Queen is in residence, a Union Jack. So it says if the Queen is in residence. So this really implies that she's not always there. So it cannot be true that the Queen is always at Buckingham Palace, because sometimes the Royal Standard will be flying. And you can just see here in this picture, there's a Union Jack there sticking out of the top. So that indicates in this particular picture, she was obviously in residence. So well done. If you managed to get all 7 of those correct, you can record down your score there. Let's move on now to the next set of questions. And the next set of questions are synonyms. So we're looking for words that mean the same. So again, when you're doing these, you need to add in the letters to make sure that they are synonyms. So what have we got on question 8? We've got stain and tarnish. It's about using the letters that you're already given. Then we've got enrage and infuriate. If you infuriate someone, you make them very angry. And then the method and the process. And another good word for this is procedure. What's the method? What's the process? What's the procedure that you're going to be using? So hopefully you got those ones correct. If any words you don't know, obviously put them in your word and meaning book. Then we've got delicate and dainty. Another good synonym for that is fragile. That is a word that's come up quite a bit during this block, fragile. Quiet and subdued. So that means to be hushed. Then we've got voluntary and optional. So another sort of way of describing those two words would be not compulsory. Don't have to do it. It's voluntary, it's optional. And then let's move on to the next set of questions here. And we're looking at opposite in meaning. So we've got accepted, which generally means to be believed. When it's contentious, it's a bit more debatable, or it's a bit of a contentious topic. It's a bit more debatable. So again, really good vocabulary this to put down in your word and meaning book. You can be fairly certain in your 11 plus you're bound to have opposites or synonyms, or possibly even both. Then we've got 15, we've got capable, so being able, whereas inept means not able, so sort of unable to do something, not very capable. Relax and toil. Toil means to work hard, so those are obviously opposites. Participate and abstain. If you abstain, then you refrain from doing something, but participate, you take part. Then we've got number 18, we've got unknown and identified. Those would be opposites. Allow and prohibit. And then success and debacle. So, I hope you've got those ones correct. Again, if there's any words you didn't know within there, then please do put them in your word and meaning book. And it's also worth focusing on the words within the actual question, not just the answers. So if you didn't know what heedless meant, then obviously look them up in sight if that was a new word for you. Then look it up and put it in your word and meaning book. Right, let's move on to the last test that we're going to be reviewing. And we're going to be reviewing test 27. And this is on pages 98 to 100. So you're hopefully right near, fairly well towards the end of your book here. Right, this is a closed passage, quite an interesting one about tomfoolery, and we will actually read this through in a moment, but let's just have a little look and see what we've got. So these are the answers. I'm just going to read it through and hopefully you can follow it. And this is always a good idea that certainly at the end, when you finish, you put all the words in, you do read it to make sure that it makes sense. If someone acts naughtily or mischievously, their behaviour could be described as tomfoolery, a term which is thought to have come from a name that was often given to court jesters, tomfool. One famous tomfool, who is rumoured to have been the inspiration behind a character in one of Shakespeare's plays, was Thomas Skelton. Skelton was a court jester at Muncaster Castle, Cumbria, during the 16th century. According to legend, Skelton is said to have directed visitors who he disliked towards the dangerous quicksands along the River Esk. It is also alleged that Skelton was responsible for the murder of a local carpenter. When Skelton learned that his master's daughter was in a relationship with the carpenter, he informed his master immediately. Skelton then received orders to kill the carpenter, and so he chopped off the poor man's head. There we go. So, hopefully you were able to fill in those words accurately. We'll just give those ones a tick. Obviously the spelling is really important, but obviously making sure that word fits in the context of those sentences. Some quite tricky words there. Hopefully you've done well. Let's have a look at the next set of questions. So the next set of questions, we're looking at words with a similar meaning. So these are multiple meanings. We obviously refer to these words as homonyms. These are words with a dual meaning. So we've got chatter, prattle, walk and hike, and ramble is the answer. You might remember coming across ramble when we were talking about the Lake District and we came across Alfred Wainwright. We talked about ramblers. So rambler is a walker, but if you ramble on and on, you're sort of chattering continuously. Number 14, we've got score. That can be the result or an outcome, or it can mean to sort of gouge out or scratch a notch. So, score. 15, we've got resolve, and this can mean perseverance, of course, determination, but also if you resolve something, you find a solution. Number 16, we've got case, and this can be either a circumstance, or we could also talk about a box being a case. Number 17, we've got liable, so that could be being accountable or inclined. and so that goes with both pairs. So again, well done if you managed to get all of those correct. Let's have a look at the next ones. These are kind of like odd ones out. So we've got 18 is laugh because all the others are facial expressions. Number 19 is hollow. All the others are names of animals' dwellings. So you've got sty, set and nest. 20, we've got the others are times of the day. So we've got midnight, dusk and twilight. Then we've got moonlight as the odd one out. And then 21, we've got spoils because all the others mean disadvantages. So pitfalls, catches and snags. And then we've got 22 is conceal. All the other mean to admit, to divulge, disclose or confess if you would admit something. So again, divulge might be a good word to put in your word and meaning book. And the last set of questions, these are going to be synonyms. So we're looking for two words that mean the same. We've got fascinated and riveted. If you're riveted by something, you're really captivated by it, you think it's amazing. Postpone and adjourn, those mean to delay. And then we've got attempt and endeavour, in other words, try. And then we've got downcast and subdued. We had subdued earlier, so hopefully that might have helped you if you were able to get hushed, meaning quiet. Sometimes putting those words again into the same sentence can really help you as well. So you can record your score out of 26. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. We look forward to seeing you in our next live lessons, and we hope you have a wonderful half-term holiday. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.